In this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we'll talk about some of the emotional dynamics that often derail a family-owned business. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Oh, welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson. And
I am Michelle Hill.
And we're here again. And a couple of months ago, we started talking about family businesses in some of these episodes. So today we thought we would bring up another topic today, realizing that we work with so many businesses that happen to be for sure private, but many of them end up being family-owned businesses.
Yes.
And so with this episode, we're looking at the secrets, or actually the stories that people don't talk about that derail businesses. And this is such a crazy topic where, it looks like everything's running smooth on the outside. There's a lot of legacy going on. It looks like everything's running smoothly. There's a little bit of a love fest because it's all family and there's a lot of loyalty, but
yes,
there's lots of stuff that's not being said.
Yes,
so are you hearing some of that? Do you hear that?
Well, yes. And I think it's twofold, I believe. And I know we're going to focus on the family side, but I believe you've got the family, as you get into the multiple generations, people not wanting to say certain things, they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want to upset, whatever, right? But then you also have people that work in a family business who are not family. Right. And then there's also, especially if someone in that family business is managing a family member.
Oh, right.
Right? I mean, yes. that can get really uncomfortable as well. And even though people say, oh, treat them like an employee, I want to know. And
families say that all the time. Just treat them like every other employee. It's like you can't take off the hat that says the son, the daughter, the brother, this wife, the whatever it is.
Because I might offend someone. And
it's quite the story. In fact, when we do a lot of individual coaching, and it's during some of those one-on-one conversations that all this stuff bubbles up, that, we are not therapists. Let's put that out there. We are not therapists, but sometimes it really feels like it.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like it, for sure. Yeah. Well, what are those unsaid things that, statements, because reality is you just love family businesses. I don't know. There's like something wrong, but you love family businesses. So, what are some of those things that you've picked up on through the years? Because this could be many years, actually.
Well, don't talk about how many years. But I was doing some work over the weekend to prepare for this, and I came up with a whole bunch. But we're not going to go over all of them. Okay. But one of the big ones, and I've heard this probably since day one, and I'm not so sure this wasn't a factor between my dad and me at some point in time too, but it's the idea that I don't know that the next generation is ready. I don't know that they're prepared. And in them saying that to me or saying that around other people, they're not doing anything to prepare for it. And so they're not ready to have the conversation. And it looks like from the next gen that they're not ever going to retire. They're never going to move on to the next thing or give up those decisions. Mm-hmm. And so they're just saying, I don't want to have this conversation because I'm going to hurt their feelings. And I think all of these are wrapped up in a nice little bow that nobody wants to hurt somebody else's feelings.
Yes. Well, and I think by not saying something, there's the other consequences is the younger generation thinks they're doing well.
Right.
Right? I mean, because they're not receiving criticism. They're not receiving, hey, these are some areas we need to grow and we need to build you here, give you some experience in here. Right. That avoidance actually causes the wrong feelings sometimes in the other person.
That's actually even a whole nother separate issue that we run into, and that and it goes from the current generation to the next generation, or peer to peer, meaning siblings or people who are related in other ways. They don't give good feedback to people. Yeah. Either they just don't give it at all. They just walk around with it. Yes. There's this false harmony. Right? Yes. Or they, if they do blurt something out, it's clouded with some other kind of history
Yes.
or other emotion that's going on, and so they don't know how to say it correctly. So people are not giving feedback correctly, honestly,
Yes.
truthfully, timely. They're just not doing that because they're afraid that they're going to hurt somebody's feelings, and in fact, they probably do.
Yes. Well, and I think what you're saying too is the person receiving the feedback is going to possibly hear that feedback coming from maybe a childhood voice, right? And that it's more of a judgment, and they're not going to really necessarily feel true to that feedback. That's them just being them again.
Right.
And even if they do have the really good intentions and want to be helpful, it's like, how do we go about doing that?
So I remember when my dad and I first were in the business, and I would have to have this conversation because if he and I were disagreeing, even though we were business partners, I often felt like he was talking to me like the 16-year-old Andrea.
Yeah.
And talking, I don't know that he was trying to talk down to me, but he was talking down, and I was hearing it through 16-year-old ears. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And conversosely, I was thinking of him as like, quit being my dad. Just be my business partner.
So defensive. I'm not listening.
And so, but it was because when the feedback was given, we were not realizing that we weren't looking at the other person through the business role that they were in. It was automatically shifted back to the familial role that we played in each other's lives.
Yes.
So, I think that the fear of telling the truth is a big issue.
Yes.
Another one that I notice is that there's a lot of difference between the generations and who's really wanting or willing to do change. So oftentimes Gen 2 will come to us and say, usually dad or uncle or whoever the person is in charge at the senior level he won't let me change this, whatever software is, or go into another territory, or we need to shift this way this plant or organization set up, or the way the reporting structure. Like they won't change. And the current generation is saying, yeah, but it's working just fine.
It's working just fine, or maybe they don't know enough. They don't know enough to give me that, right?
Right. And they will also say, and the risk is bigger now. It's like, if I am 60 or 70 or older in the game, it's like, I don't know if I want to make all these changes with the risk, and can we get it back to the way it needs to be?
Yes.
Versus a younger generation might say, what happens if we change it? We'll just fix it. We'll adjust.
Because what happens if we don't?
What happens if we don't? So the difference in what's being said is like, people are not, they're just saying no, I guess is the point.
Yes.
They're not saying yes, they're not asking more questions. They're not getting bigger clarity. They're not seeing why I'm saying no or why we could do something different.
They're not asking those open-ended questions to really understand. And again, I think that sometimes that first generation or that generation charge, they're listening to that next generation, again, through similar to the opposite of what we just talked about, but through their kid, they're thinking more of, that's still Jimmy, right? Or that Catherine's just, she doesn't have all this experience.
Right.
So,
okay. So have you heard this one? They wouldn't really have a job if they weren't related.
Is that coming from a non-family person, or is that coming from both? Okay. Yes. And I have heard it from both. I think a little more of the other, non-family, but yes. Yeah, they wouldn't have a job if dad didn't or mom didn't keep them.
Right. And so there's no discussion about it. I mean, we're not talking about what we call the family tax, in that we got to hire this person, or we don't see this person contributing and yet being compensated for not contributing to the level that anybody else would be held accountable to.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And that person saying it, they're also looking for that person to do things to prove them right. So they're not helping the situation, right? I mean, it's unconsciously, they're just doing that. So,
yeah, let's do one more. I would say one of the biggest ones that probably is almost never realized until it's brought up. And that is that they are holding on to a family resentment from way back in their lives, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back with the idea of, when they were a teenager, that they were always in trouble, or they got in trouble with the law, or they were, flexing their wings a little bit to try what's going on, or they were mom or dad's favorite.
Well, and also I bumped into that's the older child who didn't the business hadn't been started yet or whatever, and so then while that child was growing up, there was like things were tight. They didn't do a lot of things because they were really focusing on building the business. And then the younger child or children, when they kind of came, obviously there's a gap, but when they came in, as they were growing up, they got to live easier because the business was doing well. They had everything given to them, and so there's that resentment, right? And it's and you can't fault either child because it wasn't. I mean, it was just the timing,
right?
But there's definitely that resentment.
Well, and I know of folks where it's like you can't tell these people because they're going to hold it against you for the rest of your life.
Yes,
they keep score.
Yes,
and so they're mounting up the things that. Because you did this wrong or you did that happen or things like that. So there's a lot of the things that we don't even realize that when we were younger that we formulated these opinions about our cousins or our siblings or our other relatives.
Yeah, because it definitely can layer out.
And we hold on to these things, right?
It's that belief system we build.
So we have all these things.
Yes.
What happens if we don't address them? This is not unique to the family business. When trust is lost, because that's really what's happening.
That's really is what's happening.
Right?
They don't trust each other.
So think about it. When trust is lost, what happens? Why is this even a big deal?
Well, I mean, they can implode.
Right.
Right. I mean, there is that. You can also create a very toxic culture. Even to the point where you don't realize it, but you can create an us versus them easily from one sibling or cousin or family member to the other. And then the employees, they feel it, hear it, pick up on it. And so then there's this friction. It's no longer just family. It's the people that work in this part of the business and this part of the business. And now they have these huge silos and they're working against each other, not with each other. Right. So what are those things?
So we have passive resistance. We have false harmony. We have lack of trust. We have issues related to the company actually faltering because all these things are happening. And so this whole topic is most family businesses don't fail or struggle because of a strategy. They fail because of the emotions that are happening between everyone else.
Yes.
And so so to do something about this.
Yes, I was just going to say, one
of the things that we do, in fact, I've got a couple of different families right now that we're working with in various situations, but one of the things that we talk about is what right now is not being said. So we start asking the questions, but we have to name it. And so, part of the worksheet that's in the show notes for this particular episode.
Perfect.
Walks you through a process of, first of all, what are some of the things? And we didn't give you all of them. We just, for sake of time, we just gave you a few of the things that we noticed. But just what are the things that you are not saying to other people? And what would happen if we could fix it? But let's name it. I don't trust so-and-so. Why not? Or I'm not telling them this because of that. Let's start naming those kinds of things. And once you start naming them, then it's not just what I call buffering in your head, right? It's not just like, because when you think of something over and over again, or you do something over and over, or you say something over and over again, it becomes a habit of thought, right?
Yes.
And so these habits of thought become how we act, and that's not healthy because it's just becoming a more deeply entrenched habit.
Yes.
So let's name it, and then we have to start having conversations.
Yes. That's where people get very uncomfortable.
Okay, so here's what we.
I've got a couple things I just thought of when you said that. So anyway,
right. So most of the time when we feel like something is going to be really, really tough, we make the story much bigger in our heads, right? So I don't care if you're a family member, I don't care if you are a manager leader, or you need to confront somebody on something that's not working. We make up this the script is like, well, I'm going to say this, and the other person's going to say that, and then I'm going to say this, and they're going to say that, and
that
everything's
never
going to
works.
work, right? Nobody follows. I follow a script, but they don't follow a script, so that doesn't work, right?
Sure.
And so there's a couple of different kinds of questions that you can ask. Like, let's have a conversation. And what are some of the things that you believe about the future of the business? Let's open up that conversation. We can start thinking and dialoguing about that. And maybe we're actually on the same page, but we don't realize it because we never talk about it.
Yes.
Or one of my favorite questions is having a person think about, what do you assume I want? So if I'm having you, and you're my sibling and my sister, cousin, right? And it's like, when we're looking at the business, what do you think I want? And it's not in a defensive way, not like, what do you think I want? With your arms crossed and you've got this, bitter beer face. It's like, I'm trying to say
it's more of that curious, and even almost even saying, I'm really curious.
Right.
When you think of the business, what do you?
Or even ask,
what do you
tell me
think?
what you want in this business, and getting the other person to open up and have that dialogue, or have a group of people talk about that. And it's not about making the decision about that. It's simply getting the invisible visible.
Yes.
And when you do that, if you don't feel comfortable thinking you can manage the emotions of that, bring in a third party. Okay.
Yes.
A neutral third party. And so,
Yes.
making sure, we understand that even if you brought us in, if someone thinks that dad brought us in or the sister brought us in, that we're on their side, it's got to be understood that there's a neutral third party that is going to walk you through the process and help be a little bit of a referee in the process.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It's helping manage those emotions, helping people. Let's let this person complete their conversation with their thoughts.
I talk to lots of estate attorneys, as well as people who are family members in family businesses. And there are so often times when the subject comes up that people won't make decisions about the business because it might not feel fair to another family member.
Yes.
Or it might not be, they're assuming what somebody else wants or what
but they
their
haven't
motivation.
asked them.
There hasn't been the conversation.
No. Correct.
And so if you take anything away from this episode, let's wrap up a couple of these things. One, there's a lot not being said. Let's just know that. And you're not the only one, and there are other people having other conversations, other thoughts. They're not being said, and we need to get the invisible to be visible. Second is, let's figure out how to name it so that we can be real about it, as opposed to this talk about assuming what other people think or do or their motivations, because we don't know.
We don't know.
And then find ways that you can have the conversation where you're not accusing someone, but you're truly curious to really want to understand how that process works. And I really, really recommend. Did I say really twice in a row?
You did.
That was really
That was really, really bad.
I think it's really important that we recommend that people walk through the worksheet, because that's really all it is. It's just a guide to help you start through the process. And then once you start going through the process and you realize that all the parties have some part of relationship or have responsibility in it, bring in a third party to help you out. Because I really think that you want your company to succeed, you want the legacy to continue, but you want their reputation within the family and outside the family to be supportive to grow into your future.
Yeah. And I think there's a big piece of all of those things too, is those conversations. It's finding out, what do we have in common?
And there's a lot more in common than
because
not.
there usually is. It's just we get so focused on these little nuances and the assumptions that we're making versus that.
Things that would be difficult conversations. They don't need to be difficult because we just need to open up the conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Leadership Hustle. Don't forget that in this particular episode, we have a downloadable that you can take to your family and use it. And if you can't reach it through the downloadable or on the episodes, reach out to us and we will get a copy sent to you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode.